A Mardi Gras horror story. Rachel had always wanted to go to New Orleans and experience Mardi Gras, the annual parade in New Orleans. Rachel was fascinated by the cultural significance as well as the pomp of the parade, particularly the floats and costumes involved. She finished her work for the month, booked a ticket and Airbnb accommodations, and flew directly to New Orleans. She was accompanied by her sister, Marcy, and her best friend, Jessica. As soon as the clock struck 6 p.m., New Orleans became a city of color and life. Rachel, her sister, and Jessica were livid at the sounds and sights of everyone enjoying themselves. She could see people dressed in bright, elaborate costumes and having a good time. She then decided to do a little sightseeing on her part, so she told the two girls where she was headed and promised to be back at the Airbnb in an hour. As she walked along the street, she noticed a darkly lit path. She made her way to the dark path and began walking along. She then saw a clearing up ahead. She walked over and saw what looked like a large park with large trees littered all over. What impressed her the most were the large stone statues that seemed to resemble small houses grouped together. She could even see several stone figures. Then she realized where she was. This was a cemetery. She had wandered into a cemetery. She looked back and saw that the path behind her was now an ornate wrought iron gate. Okay, how in the world did I get here? She asked herself. As she walked, she stopped in her tracks as she came across a figure wearing a long black cloak and a wide hat walking about. It must be someone who got lost as well, she thought, and began to approach the cloaked figure. She stopped in her tracks when she saw the cloaked figure was carrying a long stick and was pulling what looked like a wheelbarrow. It then stopped and turned its head towards Rachel. She took a quick look and chuckled nervously. The figure seemed to be wearing an almost realistic skull mask that she couldn't help but be impressed at how realistic it looked. She was even more impressed with the way the figure hunched over, giving the illusion that it was menacing and frightening. "Wow, you're committed," she said. "Anyhow, do you know where I can take a shortcut out of here?" The cloaked figure slowly raised a hand and pointed towards a direction. Taking it as a way, Rachel thanked the figure and was about to walk towards the direction where it pointed when she saw the figure begin to pull the wheelbarrow once more towards the direction. She then noticed what looked like a group of people following behind the wheelbarrow. She was equally impressed with their costumes that she reached out to try and touch them. Only her hand went through the crowd. In fact, the more she reached out to touch, the more she realized that they weren't tangible. Suddenly realizing what they were, Rachel felt her heart beat louder in fright. She then felt something loom behind her. She looked over her shoulder and saw the cloaked figure standing behind her, lifting the stick he held. Only upon closer inspection, she realized it wasn't a stick. It was a scythe. It was going to strike her. She covered her eyes and let out a horrified scream. Rachel woke up to find herself on a gurney being lifted by EMTs into an ambulance. She then asked the EMT if they had seen the cloaked figure with the scythe. They looked at her with confused looks. Then one of the EMT chuckled and replied, "You must have seen the Anku." "Anku? What's that?" The EMT went on to say that the Anku was the guardian of the cemetery, who patrolled the grounds and ensured that those who died were led to the right place. The Anku was supposedly the spirit of the last person to be buried of the year, who becomes the Anku for the year before a new soul is given the task, and so on. "You're lucky to be alive," the EMT said. "If that was the Anku, he might have thought you were a dangerous trespasser. He is very protective of the cemeteries." Rachel couldn't believe what she was hearing. and for her own sake, she decided not to tell her sister and Jessica. And when she told me the story, she would say that there were times when she would pass the cemeteries that she would see a cloaked man with a wide hat carrying a stick, looking at her from the distance.